Hi, what's poppin'? It's your boy Big Rich, Queens, New York City, where we get busy. 103 degrees, real feel. This heat is beating me down. But business must be conducted. You know what I always say. Rules don't change. Gentlemen, wipe your feet on the rug. Throw some smoke in the atmosphere. Today's video is sponsored by Justice Tech Pro. Salute to Dominic Crea and his whole team. Hope everything's well, or as well as can be. I know it's a rough time for you and your family, and we are sending you our best wishes, buddy. Now, this article, of course, written by Lisa Babic, a.k.a. MS, from the ItalianInquisition.com. I'm going to have a link in the description box going right to her webpage. Follow the webpage. Then when you get there, there'll be a link to her YouTube page. Go follow her YouTube page. She writes some kick-ass articles, man. And salute, she's giving me, freedom to cover any story that she does, which helps us grow, so we return the love, right? All right, let's get right into it. Mob Story, Season 2. Truth and Lies in the Michael Meldish Murder Sentencing Hearings, Round 1. Even during sentencing hearings, the government continued to spin their tales. Benjamin Franklin once said a lie stands on one leg. Truth stands on two. Today I stand on two legs. I am innocent. I had nothing to do with the tragic death of Mr. Meldish. I conspired with no one. Those were the words said to the court by Matthew Madonna, who, along with Christopher Londonio and Terence Caldwell, faced their immediate fate on Monday for their alleged involvement in the 2013 murder of Michael Meldish. The three men were sentenced to life imprisonment during separate hearings, 8 months after being handed a guilty verdict in a trial where the evidence presented remains highly questionable. Stephen L. Crea, who was convicted as well during the month-long trial last November, is scheduled for sentencing next week because a video conferencing slot couldn't be secured for Monday's date. The defendants had requested remote sentencing because of the COVID-19 crisis, which Judge Seibel granted last week. Caldwell, the accused triggerman in the Meldish murder, chose to appear in person at the U.S. District Court in White Plains, New York, and was the first to be handed his expected fate. Arriving at the nearly empty courthouse dressed in his prison-issued orange jumpsuit, shackled and escorted by 3 U.S. Marshals, Caldwell seemed relaxed. After the 2 marshals removed his cuffs, he chatted with his lawyer, George Goltzer, and the two bumped fists, an obvious sign of a strong and respectful relationship formed between Caldwell and his court-appointed counsel. In fact, when Caldwell addressed the court later, the only thing he said was, "I want to thank my lawyer for representing me." That's about it. And that was about all that happened in terms of pleasantries during the hour-long proceedings. As expected, there was the victim speech given by Assistant U.S. Attorney Hagen Scotton, who said that even though Meldish may have been a criminal, he had a son who will never see his father again. But let's put "may have been a criminal" into a little bit of perspective. Law enforcement described Meldish as a stone-cold killer who was suspected as the leader of the notorious Purple Gang, a criminal group that controlled the drug trade in the Bronx and Harlem in the 70s and 80s, of murdering and dismembering over 50 rivals. Police pursued him for more than 30 years, but couldn't bring him to justice even though he had been arrested 18 times. They claimed it was because Meldish had terrified witnesses so much they would not come forward. And even though Meldish was found dead in his car with a single shot to the back of the head, Scotton told the court that Caldwell waited for him to step out of the car before killing him. So, did Meldish just fall perfectly back into the car in a sitting position with one leg out and one leg in? Or did the government get it all muddied up, again like their original story a la Frank Pasqua III, a.k.a. a disgracia? Scotton also wanted to make it clear that he felt Caldwell wasn't a free-thinking or even a smart man, telling the court that when Caldwell became part of this mafia lifestyle, he became a victim of that lifestyle by men smarter than him, who took advantage of him. He then asked the court to impose the maximum sentence available. The hearing didn't have to take as long as it did either. Judge Seibel more than likely knew what she was going to hand down to Caldwell, but something needed to be put on the record. So she decided to share every personal detail of Caldwell's life, even mentioning his run-in with the laws as far back as when he was 16 years old. run-ins which shouldn't even have been relevant to the current charges, considering Caldwell is now 62. If that wasn't enough, she also made disparaging remarks about his mother and father, which were totally irrelevant. Said that Caldwell had no family, no children, no relationships. Added that it's a sad life that Mr. Caldwell has essentially accomplished, and slapped him with life sentence after life sentence for the various counts. It should be noted that afterwards, Goltzer informed the court that Caldwell had a 100-year-old aunt who recently passed away, with whom he had been close. Matthew Madonna. About a half hour later, it was Madonna's turn at the guillotine, and he didn't fare any better. For those not familiar with how video sentencing works, it's like a Zoom conference where the defendant sits in a video-equipped room in whatever facility he's at, and his lawyers, the judge, and the prosecutors join in via their computer cameras. The family, public, and press listen in via audio and are muted so as not to disturb the proceedings. Like Caldwell, the government dug deep into the well to make sure it painted the 84-year-old Madonna in the worst light possible. This included adding information from a psych report that was done on Madonna 50 years ago, literally back in the 1950s, so its pre-sentencing report, or the PSR. Madonna's lawyer, Andrew Patel, requested deletion of 3 paragraphs that summarized those reports taken a half a century ago. And despite Judge Seibel acknowledging that psych tests have gotten more sophisticated since then, she still wanted Patel to give her a good reason why she should strike those paragraphs. While Patel gave reasonable explanations as to why 50-year-old tests might not have been valid, and said there were more current reports available, that he wasn't able to secure them before sentencing. Seibel made it clear that it didn't matter anyway because it won't make any difference to me in the sentencing. She eventually refused to delete the requested paragraph, but did decide to add a note to the PSR with the information Patel provided. Patel also objected to 2 other items in a pretrial report that said the order to kill Meldish came from Madonna, and that there was a recording of it, telling the court that no recording of such conversation was put into evidence. In fact, Patel said, this never happened. The jury heard a great deal of gossip, but no one with first-hand knowledge heard anyone say that. Still, AUSA Alexandra Rothman insisted while there was no direct evidence, Madonna was still responsible because of his alleged position that she claimed was shown in numerous recordings, which made that particular gossip valid under the Pinkerton rule, a jury instruction whereby even if they believe Madonna didn't have any involvement or knowledge about the murder, they could still find him guilty. What? Are you you understand how crazy this is? And even though, this is why I call her Crooked Kathy. Crooked Kathy, that's what you are. And even though Rothman admitted it's true, no witness testified about Madonna's direct involvement, Seibel believed that the government had proved the point through a preponderance of the evidence. She said that the case was based on circumstantial evidence, meaning that if it consisted only of testimony from government witnesses like Robert Spinelli, a disgracia. Spinelli, if you remember, became an informant because he wanted to get back at Maddie and was given a great deal of taxpayer-funded money to buy and sell drugs and other illegal items, some of which he had on the side without the government's knowledge. He also was sanctioned by the government to set people up, including trying to induce co-defendant Joseph DiTello to murder Sean Richard, another government informant, and received many other benefits. And let's not forget that Spinelli lied to New Jersey court 1 month prior to testifying at this trial for a crime he committed while being a paid government informant. But in this instance, it appears to be a case of the rules just don't apply. Yet the government seemed to revel in discussing Madonna's alleged prior life of crime, telling the court it began when he was a mere 15 years old, and whether or not he pulled the trigger, he is responsible for Meldish's murder. But unlike Spinelli, who lied about being college educated and having a job where he supervised over 20 people, Matthew Madonna actually obtained 3 degrees while incarcerated over the years, and according to Patel, also taught math and poetry to other inmates. He added that Madonna also did something unique when he asked me to thank my wife for allowing me to come see him. Patel said that has never happened before in his 30-plus years of doing this. Before Cybele went down memory lane and passed down her sentence, Madonna, in a clear, booming voice, tinged with a New York accent, cited his Benjamin Franklin quote and politely proclaimed his innocence. It didn't impress Cybele. She acknowledged Madonna's health problems, but that's about the only concession she gave him. Instead, she said while there might be cases where a judge would be uncomfortable with him imposing life without parole, she wasn't one of them. She even went as far as questioning a 1954 murder conviction of Madonna's that was apparently reduced to first-degree murder and wondered out loud how that happened. It's unclear, Cybele said, why it was reduced to first-degree murder. It's surprising she didn't wonder, as Gangland News reported in its June 18, 2020 column, why the government, specifically UASA Scott Hartman, was allowed to deceive Madonna's lawyers that they insisted to bring his former associate turned informant, Nikki Barnes, to testify against him at trial, especially when Barnes had already been dead for 7 years when Hartman made that revelation. But as she did with the government's other unethical behaviors throughout the 5-year case, it wasn't an issue she felt was necessary to bring up. After all, it was Madonna facing the guillotine, and not the government. And as has been shown throughout history, the government is never brought to justice for their alleged sins, like anyone who is reputed to be involved in organized crime. Again, I've been saying this since the first episode of Mob Stories. The government is the biggest gang, mob, organized criminals in town. Remember that. And these same criminals are the ones that are writing law. I don't care how anybody sees it. If you don't see your government as crooked and you're out here pointing fingers at people in the street, you're asleep. Cybele said that Madonna has very little to be proud about and wanted to make sure she was protecting the public when considering what sentence to impose. It was, she said, a spectacular case, the kind of which hasn't been seen for a while. So she imposed her sentence, including mandatory life, and just for fun, added some supervised release terms, but concluded that in all likelihood, Madonna will never get out of jail. But just in case, she felt the need to set conditions. Christopher Londonio. Perhaps the worst sentencing of the day happened to Christopher Londonio, who appeared via video shortly after Madonna. There were objections by Christopher's lawyer, Louis Freeman, over wording in his PSR related to extortion, which Freeman believed was inaccurate and misleading. Specifically, that Christopher was heavily and personally involved in it, and that it would give the wrong impression to a reader in the future. In the government's justification for using these words, Rothman read the court a lengthy excerpt from a recording where Londonio used numerous expletives while allegedly threatening someone. Judge Cybele said Mr. Londonio's involvement in this is overwhelming, but decided the word heavily could be deleted. There was also another objection to a paragraph that stated Christopher was personally involved in an alleged marijuana deal that was only discussed but no action taken. Rothman justified the inclusion, citing recorded conversations between co-defendant Carmine Garcia and reputed Genovese soldier Salvatore Larca, photos and other unrelated recordings made by Spinelli, but said that Londonio failed to show up for the alleged deal. When Cybele asked whether evidence of the deal was presented at the trial, Rothman admitted no evidence was introduced at the trial that the deal went through. In addition, Freeman objected to a paragraph regarding the sale of stolen cigarettes that involved Spinelli and Ditello, but not Londonio, and asked for the drug count to be dismissed. Cybele said, although I agree with Mr. Freeman that the evidence was not as strong as she cited a gazillion different cases, laws to prove her point, and denied Freeman's request. Rothman made remarks on behalf of the government, which included the claim that Londonio wrote a false affidavit for his underboss Crea, a blatant lie, as that was something only said by Cybele during the trial when both Crea and Londonio asked for severance in order for Londonio to testify and refute David Evangelista's testimony of disgracia. Evangelista was the government's only witness to Cria's alleged involvement in the Meldish murder. After his testimony only consisted of his recollection of an alleged confession Londonio made to him while they were incarcerated together in the same cell block at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. Evangelista was also the same witness who claimed Londonio was planning an elaborate made-for-TV movie-style escape that involved Londonio's parents, a family priest, and his wife. The alleged escape was added to the indictment in 2017. However, he was acquitted of that charge, presumably because the story Evangelista told to the FBI agent Ted Otto was insane. Rothman also claimed that Londonio called Madonna a father and Matthew Madonna called him a rat. This was actually partially true. Madonna did allegedly call Londonio a rat. But as usual, there's more to the story, including the government's years-long attempt to turn Londonio through numerous methods, which included accidentally putting him in the GEO facility, well known throughout the prison as a rat jail, and spreading rumors to the media early on in the case that the government had informants at the ready. Rumors, by the way, that came out after Londonio and Caldwell were arrested in 2015. Freeman asked for leniency, stating that Londonio had attempted to garner a plea deal. There was no global plea deal despite other reports stating there was, and to break ranks, so to speak, and find an Eighth Amendment violation to give Londonio hope for the future. Londonio politely addressed the court, telling Judge Seibel that he had nothing to say, Your Honor. Thank you. Seibel then went through the charges, making the expected comments at each one, including if it weren't for people like Mr. Londonio, the mob wouldn't have reached the level it has. She even brought up the escape charge, saying that even though he was acquitted of that charge, she believed he was at least planning to escape from prison. She chided his sense of loyalty, saying it was very misplaced, and said that even if he wanted to take a plea, he did have another option that he didn't take. I would fall off my chair if there was no cooperation deal offered, she added. Like every other defendant in the case, Judge Seibel showed no compassion for the 46-year-old Londonio. Quote, I just find it tragic that Mr. Londonio is going to do a life sentence, she said as she handed down her sentence, which, like the others, was over the minimum mandatory guidelines. But, she said, that is the corner you paint yourself into if you decide to be a wise guy. Like Madonna, she lessened it slightly by adding supervised release guidelines, but added, I don't think Mr. Londonio will ever see supervised release. She then told Londonio she didn't envy him and suggested that while in prison, he could still do something useful by preventing people from joining that life. But in the end, the fair and impartial Judge Seibel made one final zinger. Your loyalty, she said, I hope that keeps you warm at night. So first of all, you could see why I completely detest crooked Kathy Seibel. This is not a judge. This is someone who has a personal problem with these men. You could tell by the way she talks. It's like a personal vendetta. I can't wait for these people's appeal to go through, okay? This is crazy, man. First of all, salute to Lisa Babbitt. Great article as usual. I told you guys that she came into New York to go to the sentencing. Salute to her. You'll find a link to her page in the description box. And, of course, we got to thank our friends over at Justice Tech Pros. If you guys have not subscribed to his channel, please go do. He's a good friend of ours. And this is Stephen Cria's son, Dominic Cria. All right? Mob Story Season 2, gentlemen, you know the rules. Like, comment, share. If this is the first time you're seeing one of my videos, please subscribe. And then go back and listen to all the videos that we put up. Salute. And we will talk soon.